Wall Street Journal dropped a bomb today. Remember back early 2020 when most of us were just starting to hear about this mysterious new coronavirus in China? Well, in Washington, some federal officials were making moves, buying and selling stocks and mutual funds and raking in millions of dollars. These were the people pulling the strings, officials across several agencies, all of which had a hand in the government's response to the coming pandemic. According to the Journal's analysis, roughly 240 officials at health agencies and the Pentagon owned a ton of stock in drug and biotech companies that won federal contracts for treating COVID. The exact amount is, to this point, unclear, but the Wall Street Journal reports it's somewhere between $9 and $28 million. Officials at the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department were also wheeling and dealing in early 2020. The Journal reporters wrote, in part, on February 28th, the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell signaled in a written statement that the central bank was prepared to cut interest rates. In the 7 days preceding that statement, officials at the Treasury and Fed reported more than twice as many trades as they made during the same 7 days of 2019. The Fed instituted a policy earlier this year that severely restricts what top officials can buy and sell. That's new. And it's important to note, trading stocks isn't necessarily a problem. There are no restrictions on federal officials investing in mutual funds at all. They just can't work on projects in which they have a major financial stake. And they can't trade on non-public information. You can't do that. The Journal reports ethics officials confirmed that all of the workers identified in their investigation did follow those rules. But it does raise questions. Should federal officials be allowed to profit from information that the public might not yet have? Rebecca Ballhaus is here. Hers is the first of 5 bylines on the deep dive that dropped today in the Wall Street Journal and at WSJ.com. Rebecca, how widespread is this?
So we were looking at this specifically in just a couple of agencies to start. We were looking at the health agencies, we were looking at the Treasury and the Fed. And I think what we found is that it's really much more widespread than that. While we did find these patterns that you're talking about at HHS specifically, where there was a 60% jump in sales in January 2020 compared to the average over the previous year, there was similarly a jump at Treasury in buys in February. But we also found a number of instances across the federal government, both of officials owning stock in companies that were affected by the government's pandemic response and of making these well-timed sales. One person that comes to mind is Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, who bought at least $600,000 in funds in March 2020 as her husband was leading negotiations on the Hill over a very market-boosting stimulus bill.
Wow. Federal regulators must recognize that even if there's nothing illegal or unethical happening, even if the perception is there, anything being done to tighten enforcement or enact new rules?
It's a good question, and I think we're not quite there yet. As you noted, the Fed did introduce these new rules earlier this year that restrict whether top officials can own or trade stocks. The other thing those rules did was say that officials can't trade during moments of heightened market stress. And I think what we really found in this investigation is that, for the most part, rules like that restrict trading during very sensitive moments, for example, in a fast-moving crisis where market-moving information is moving very quickly around the federal government, there are no rules that restrict whether you're allowed to trade during those moments, because the rules are really more focused on what you're allowed to trade, not when. Heightened market stress hadn't come yet, but it was coming. And the question is, did they know it? How could they not? Then there's the Congress thing. I only have a few seconds. But, Congress could have been stopped from trading, but Congress decided Congress shouldn't be stopped by Congress. That's right. And Congress, a lot of those bills have also mentioned some of the people that we're talking about, which is federal executive branch officials. There was also a bill introduced in the House just this summer that would restrict those officials from owning and trading individual stocks. We haven't seen a whole lot of headway on either one of those.
Wow, it's quite a deep dive. Really enjoyed it. Above the Fold and at WSJ.com. Thank you so much.